So Aida grew up in Venezuela, where her parents were missionaries. She taught at the middle school, high school, and college levels. For 10 years before joining the Press Digital Learning Team. So, we are so excited to hear from you today, Aida. I love hearing you speak Spanish. It's beautiful, and you have such a passion for what you do. So, I want to give you the screen so you can have all the time you need to tell your story about from your desk to our hearts, really, and your love for Spanish. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zan, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. Hola a todos los que hablan español. Estoy muy contenta de estar aquí con ustedes hoy. And I'm going to share a little bit about the process behind our BJU Press Spanish courses. So when we start working on a course, there is a lot that needs to take place before it gets to you. So I want to just talk a little bit about that process. A lot needs to be organized for a course to happen, and a lot takes place from the first time that I open the book at my desk to when you open your box of books and DVDs, or if you do it online, okay, to when you open all of that and start the course at your computer, your desk. So our processes have changed a little bit throughout the years. So now it's a little different than when I did Spanish 2, for example, that was in 2016. So right now, the process really starts with segments. When a book is being finalized and the book is not printed yet, the authors are still fine tuning things, we start working with the PDFs. And this can actually happen months or even years before we start working on a particular course. So what I do is that I start looking through the book, narrow down the concepts, what concepts are emphasized. I look through the objectives. I look to see what level of proficiency we're trying to accomplish through that book. And then we start putting together the ideas for working on the segments for that course. At this time, we focus a lot on culture. We want students to be well versed in the Hispanic culture, and I'll talk more about this a little bit later. So, this step in the process takes a little while, but once we have narrowed down the topics that we're gonna cover in the segments, then we get to work and production. The production team starts working on the segments, and because I teach Spanish, I have to be a little more involved in this process. And then, but the nice thing is that when we actually start working on the course, then a lot of the segments are already done. So the first step when we actually start working on the course is meeting with instructional design. And I won't go into all of the details about that because you already heard a little bit about the process from Tim and Sean yesterday. But it's really helpful to go through the reviews, to evaluate the previous course, to see what worked, what didn't work, to see what needs our parents and students have right now and all that. So based on that evaluation, then we come up with a plan. And this step takes a little while, like evaluating everything, taking everything into consideration. But then once the plan is approved, then we start working on the course. Then the next step is what we call immersion. And it might happen as we're still finishing with the instructional design process. So during immersion, I go through the book and I immerse myself in the book. Okay, I try to figure out the main ideas, the concepts that we're going to be covering, the objectives. And for foreign languages, I also need to keep in mind the level of proficiency that the book is aiming at based on the ACTFL standards. And ACTFL stands for the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. So I also like to refresh my memory on the different standards and core practices and guidelines that ACTFL has for teaching foreign languages. And I try to make sure that I incorporate all that I need to into the course to meet those standards as much as possible. And I'll talk more about this in a little bit. So during the immersion stage, I also see where we might need extra activities or footage or audio or anything that will help us accomplish the academic goals and that will help students enjoy the learning process and be as successful as possible. Also, during the immersion process, we figure out if we will need extra segments, and that depends on the objectives and the concepts that will be covered in that course. But it also depends on what has been done before we actually started working on the course, those segments that were created when the textbook was still in production. Um, with Spanish, our goal is for students to hear the language as much as possible and to hear or watch real life conversations to prepare them for real life so that they can actually talk to anybody they come in contact with. So, usually, our production team writes the segments and produce this. They produce the scripts and all that. But because of the language barrier there, I have to be a little more involved in that process, which makes it a little, a little more fun. For example, for Spanish 2, my assistant and I wrote the scripts for all the segments there, and that was a lot of fun. So then the next step is planning. And some of the steps overlap, just so you know, it's not like, okay, we have to finish this one to move to the next one. So some of them overlap. At this time, when I start planning, I might still be meeting with instructional design, fine tuning the plan for the course or something like that. So, in the planning stage, I start creating what we call a schedule of lessons, which is just a long term planning tool. And from there, the teacher's assistant creates the VLG that most of you are familiar with, the video lesson guide. So to create the schedule of lessons, I go through the book, I figure out how much should be covered in each lesson, depending on the concepts that students will be learning. And having taught in the classroom for several years and also through my years teaching here, I have a pretty good idea of what topics or concepts are a little harder for students to grasp. So I make sure that I give those concepts extra time for students to digest them. So usually after the schedule of lessons has been created, we have a plan for the course, and then we start writing the scripts for each lesson. However, the course that I'm working on right now is a little different and requires a little bit of extra planning. So what I did was that after I had created a schedule of lessons, then I outlined every lesson, everything that was going to be in that lesson. And then I started working on different activities and parts of the lesson. And I can't say too much about this course right now, but I think you're going to love it. So after all that brainstorming and planning have taken place, then we start writing lessons. I'm putting into action the plan that we have created. And some courses require a little bit more work than others. It depends on the course and the textbook. For Spanish 3, for example, we had to create a lot of handouts and extra activities. So it was a little more involved. The book is more of a review, but I wanted to make sure that students had more information to study and to learn a few extra things. Then, before we start recording and while we are recording, we need to send everything to proofreading. Paperwork, PowerPoints, anything that you see in the course has to go through proofreading. The PowerPoints and the paperwork for a specific lesson has to be sent to proofreading at least 2 weeks before we record that particular lesson. Each team has a PowerPoint proofreader who checks the PowerPoints, and also we have a credit specialist, and she checks that we have credited everything that needs to be credited correctly. And we also have a proofreader that proofreads all of our paperwork. So, as you can imagine, checking all of those things take a lot of time, takes a lot of time. So, that's why we need to submit everything 2 weeks in advance before we record a particular lesson. So then depending on when the course needs to be ready by and the schedule that has been created by project management, we will start recording. And it takes several months to record a course. And, we usually record once or twice a week. It just depends on when the course needs to be ready. And it also depends on the teachers' what they like. There is a little bit of flexibility there. For example, when I recorded Spanish 2, I recorded 3 days a week, and I usually had like a 4-hour slot each one of those days. But with Spanish 1, Spanish 3, I only recorded 1 day a week, but we were there like for hours until we got everything done for that week. So it depends a little bit on what the teacher wants to do. Now, while we record, we're still writing lessons, we're writing tests and quizzes, activities, doing a bunch of different things and working on the packets, and those packets take a little while. Um, and so it's a lot when we are recording, doing a bunch of different things, and then to finish the whole course. And some people sometimes wonder, well, what do you do when you're not teaching, when you're not recording? Like, are you on a summer break or something? And we don't really have a summer break, okay? It takes a lot to record a course before and after. And it usually takes about a year, give or take, from when we start a course to when we finish it. Okay, now at BJU Press, we make sure that our courses are homeschool focused, and specifically with languages. We want to make sure that we follow the different standards and guidelines that are proven to work based on research. And these guidelines are put out by ACTFL. Like I mentioned before, ACTFL stands for the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. Now, as when we learn any language, okay, we need to focus on input, that is what goes into our ears and our brains, that's reading and listening, and output, and that's what we're able to produce, speaking and writing. And I try to make sure that students have enough input at their level, of course, to help them learn the language. The output can be just a little bit challenging through asynchronous distance learning, no matter the program that you use. So usually I spend a lot of time looking for and looking into different products that can help students even through asynchronous distance learning, so that they can develop these two areas of output, writing and speaking. A few years ago, we were not able to incorporate too many things besides what the book had because of different reasons. But now we are able to incorporate a lot more, and there's a lot more coming in the near future. So, in our Spanish 3 course, for example, students write compositions and they send them to us, and we grade them and then send them back. And that way they're able to develop their writing skills and receive feedback. Unfortunately, we cannot do this for Spanish 1 and 2 right now, but we have other ways in which they can practice their writing. In Spanish 3, we also use a software to help students practice their pronunciation. And they can speak to the computer, and the computer gives them a score based on their pronunciation. And it is great. So you can see how you're doing in your pronunciation of the language. And we have other tools to help students in their speaking and writing as well as their listening and reading skills. Now, I just have a little tip for our Spanish courses. We have created some Quizlet lists for all courses, Spanish 1, 2, and 3. This is a little new, so I think some people might not be aware of it. The students can access the lists and practice their vocab, whether they are DVD or online customers. And I think this has really helped some students. Now, I create the lessons with the student in mind, making sure that they have all the information and all the practice that they need for a specific topic so that they can use it. My goal is for them to use Spanish in real life. The purpose of learning a language is not to recite a list of verb conjugations, but to communicate with others. So that is my goal when I plan, when I write, when I record the lessons. But I also have the parent in mind. I want parents to not feel overwhelmed trying to grade things that they're not sure about because they don't know Spanish or they took Spanish years and years ago. So as I plan, I also want to make sure that parents have the support that they need so that they can facilitate the course without frustration. And again, we've been able to do a few more things recently. And as I mentioned earlier, there are better things coming in the near future for our Spanish courses. I also want to make sure that students have extra practice and help um, and all the help that they need, like segments, extra examples, reviews, um, audio, footage, pictures, anything like that. In the course that I'm working on right now, I have tailored the activities for homeschool students so that they can develop the necessary skills even if they are by themselves at home. And I also want to make sure that students understand the culture. Learning about culture is as important as learning grammar. If a student knows how to conjugate all kinds of verbs, but they are not able to relate or to connect to the people that speak that language, they will have a hard time communicating. And if they can't communicate with the people that speak the language, then what's the purpose of learning the language, right? So I also make sure that students hear from other native speakers, from people from Latin America, like Mexico and Argentina, that have different accents, but also from people from Spain that, they not only have a different accent, but they also pronounce things a little different. And so that way, students will have a well rounded Spanish education. They'll be exposed to many different facets of the language so that they can understand people no matter where they're from. So, as you can see, doing a course takes a lot of work. And although you only see the teachers' faces on a course, there is a lot of people that are involved. There is no way we could do a course um, just by ourselves. It's definitely a team effort. So there are so many people involved in creating a course that it will take a very long time to mention everybody. So I can't do that right now because of time, but there are especially two people that are key in any course, and that is the teacher's assistant and the video specialist. They do so much for the course. The teacher's assistant, I mean, they find pictures, they work on PowerPoints, they work on handouts, answer keys, any paperwork that goes in the course. There's a lot that they do, and if there's any extra thing that the course needs, they will do it too. There's no way I could do a course without my teacher's assistant. I've had different assistants throughout the years, but my assistant right now, the one that I have for the course that I'm working on right now, is
Hola.
here. Her name is Sol, and she's from the Dominican Republic, but she's lived the last few years in Spain, and she's now helping with our new Spanish course.
Encantada.
So the next in line would be the video specialist. They are always with you in the studio, cheering you on and helping with anything. And I tell you, they are magicians. They make something look like it was just one take when it can take several takes to have the final product. They are very creative and they are a great support in so many areas. The segment writers and producers are also so creative. They take an idea and they make it real in such an incredible way. They spend so much time and effort working on different segments, and when you see the final product, it's just beautiful. The proofreaders are so great. We couldn't do this without them. When you're so focused on content and communicating an idea, or teaching a concept, you miss things, whether you like it or not. So I am so thankful for our proofreaders. Our graphic designer is also super incredible. She creates all the PowerPoint master slides with colors and designs that match the textbook. And then she works to make sure that we have all the slides that we need. She also gets all the pictures and art uh, from the textbook so that we can incorporate them in our course. So she's awesome. Also, our quality control team, they check everything and to make sure that there are no errors there. Sometimes, you might misspeak or whatever. And so they catch everything there. Our post production team, they work on putting lessons either on DVD or online, and that is a lot of work. And there are so many others, our managers, the art department, the project managers, just to name a few. So this is just a little insight into the process that takes place from when I first start working on a course till you start working on it. And I hope that you enjoyed this little glimpse of the work that goes on here at the press.